The chuck wagon lost its driver halfway across the Crescent Fork yard. One instant, the cook was standing on the brake, shouting at a mule that had caught the bit. The next, he struck the ground hard enough to roll twice, and the wagon kept moving without him. Iron pots hammered the sideboards. A coffee grinder bounced loose and spun beneath the canvas fly ahead. Ranch hands were pushing nearly 1,900 longhorns toward the north gate. The mules saw the movement and ran harder. "Clear the yard," someone shouted. Men scattered from the wagon's path. One tried to seize a bridle and missed. The lead mule flung its head, dragging the rest of the team toward the cattle. Mabel Hartwell stood beside the fence with a borrowed skillet in one hand and a sack of spoons in the other. She had come from Albany to return cookware to the ranch house before her paid room ended that night. $4 remained in her purse. Nothing waited after them. She dropped the skillet. Her father had handled freight teams before fever took him, and he had taught her one truth that shouting men often forgot. A frightened mule fought the pull it expected. The wagon would not stop on packed yard dirt. It might turn. Mabel climbed the fence before fear found a sensible argument. The wagon passed close enough for the rear wheel to strike her skirt. She caught the side rail, lost one boot from the lower brace, and hauled herself into the moving bed. The coffee grinder struck her knee. A flour sack knocked against her hip. She crawled forward while the wagon pitched beneath her, reached the seat, and found the lines dragging across the floorboards. The mules were less than 50 yards from the nearest cattle. Men at the gate waved their hats, making the animals bunch tighter. "Stop waving!" Mabel shouted. No one heard. She gathered the reins, not pulling straight back, and looked for softer ground. East of the yard lay a narrow strip where a plow had turned the earth for a garden that never took. The furrows ran away from the herd. Mabel drew the left line, gave the right enough slack to let the lead pair bend, then snapped both once. "Come around. Come on." The near mule fought her. The off mule followed the opening. Harness chains rattled. The wagon leaned. Mabel kept the turn shallow until the team's own speed carried them toward the plowed strip. A man in a dust-gray hat ran beside the lead pair, but did not grab the bridles. He saw where she was taking them and drove everyone else out of the path. "Give her room," he called. The first wheel hit broken soil. The wagon dropped rows and slammed down again. Mabel's right side struck the seat rail. Pain cut beneath her ribs and stole half a breath. She held the lines. The mules sank to their fetlocks in loose earth. Their stride shortened. 20 yards became 10. The wagon lurched to a stop, with one wheel buried deep and the team blowing white foam around the bits. Mabel stayed upright until she knew the movement was over. Then her hands began to shake. The man in the gray hat came to the side of the seat. He did not reach for her. "Can you climb down?" "Not yet." "Do you want the doctor?" "See to your cook first." The injured man lay near the center of the yard with 2 hands beside him. His ankle turned at an angle no man could work on. The gray-hatted man looked toward a broad-shouldered rider near the corrals. "Ben, get him to Albany. Tell the doctor it may be broken." Ben Lomax nodded and called for a wagon. Mabel eased one hand from the reins. A small red tin slid from beneath the cook canvas, struck the wheel hub, and landed in the dirt. Its lid held. The man stooped and picked it up. The scarred box had belonged to Mabel before Eli Hartwell's wagon accident made every surviving household object feel like a witness. Cinnamon, pepper, and dried sage remained inside. The man turned the tin once, saw the dented clasp, and offered it across the space between them without opening it. Yours? Yes. He held it by the edge so she could take it without touching his hand. Mabel closed her fingers around the metal. His eyes rested on her face, not on the black dress beneath the borrowed apron or the widow's ring she no longer wore. Seth Carver, he said, trail boss. Mabel Hartwell, Mrs. Hartwell, your side is hurt. Bruised. That is not the same as harmless. No, it is also not the same as useless. One corner of his mouth almost moved. Before he could answer, another man crossed the yard from the ranch house. Calvin Rudd was 56, sun-browned, and carrying the folded payroll sheets that had been meant for a cook, now headed toward town with a ruined ankle. He looked from the buried wagon to Mabel. Carver says you turned that team. The plowed ground did most of it. Ground does not choose itself. Calvin glanced toward the men unloading the damaged supplies. We leave today. The drive cannot wait for a cook to heal. Mabel climbed down without accepting Seth's hand. The landing pulled at her ribs, and she had to stand still until the pain passed. Seth noticed but did not announce it. How much flour for 14 men and a trail boss? Calvin asked. Depends how often you expect biscuits. Twice a day when weather allows. Then more than the wagon is carrying unless you buy again before the Red River. Salt? For men or cattle? Calvin's eyes sharpened. Men. Keep it dry and split it between 2 containers. Lose one, you still eat. Water? Heavy barrels low, centered, never both on the same side. Seth said, Can you cook? At a boarding house, when they needed me. For freight camps, when my father still hauled. Can you drive those mules tomorrow? I can drive them today. Calvin looked toward the north gate. What are you asking? Mabel kept the red tin against her palm. $30 a month, counted by days worked if the drive ends early or I leave with cause. Meals, return passage from Dodge. My sleeping place and chest stay private. When I hold the lines, the team answers to me. One ranch hand laughed near the wagon. Trail boss gives the orders. Mabel faced Seth. Then the trail boss may decide whether he wants a cook who can stop his wagon or a servant who waits for permission while it runs over cattle. Seth studied her for several seconds. The wagon and team are yours to command while you are driving or setting camp. Herd orders remain mine. Agreed, Calvin said, and if your ribs keep you from lifting, I assign the lifting. A cook who carries every kettle herself is badly managing the men standing nearby. Ben, returning from the injured cook's wagon, laughed once. Calvin did not. He nodded toward the ranch office. Put it in writing. A clerk prepared 2 copies on plain paper. The terms named wages, meals, return passage, private sleeping and storage space, and mule team authority. Mabel read every line before signing. Her personal copy went into the small chest beneath the wagon fly beside the scarred red tin. The Crescent Fork duplicate joined the payroll papers inside Seth's leather document case. By noon, Mabel's ribs were bound beneath her dress, the supplies were repacked, and the herd began moving north from Crescent Fork Ranch on April 28, 1884. She sat on the chuck wagon seat with the lines in her hands and Albany shrinking behind the dust. Near the rear of the departing crew, Ezra Pell watched her chest disappear beneath the canvas. 5 drilled $half hung against his chest on one green silk cord, each marked by a small crescent filed into the rim. As Crescent Fork passed through the gate, Ezra slid the first coin beneath his thumb and counted under his breath. 1. By the second morning, the job had already begun trying to prove Mabel a liar. She rose before the stars faded, coaxed fire from banked coals, boiled coffee, fried salt pork, mixed biscuit dough, and served 14 men before the herd began to move. Then came the harder part. Every pan had to be washed or scraped, every sack tied, every iron pot braced so it would not crack a spoke, every mule harnessed before the riders spread north. Once the last man left the fire, Mabel had to pass the herd, find the next water, choose ground for camp, and build another kitchen before the first tired hand arrived. Her ribs objected whenever she twisted. The binding beneath her dress pulled tight when she lifted. The knee struck by the coffee grinder had turned purple, but it bore her weight. The ribs were worse. Near noon, she tried to raise the largest kettle to its rear hook, and pain cut under her right side, hard enough to loosen her grip. Ben Lomax caught the handle before the kettle struck the wheel. "You told Carver it was a bruise." "It is. That bruise nearly cost us supper." "No, pride nearly cost you supper." Mabel shifted her hand away from the weight. "Hang it on the rear hook, not beside the flour." Ben obeyed, a smile hidden under his mustache. "You always order men that quickly. Only when the work is waiting." She did not mind help. She minded men deciding that accepting one useful hand meant surrendering the whole task. By the evening of April 30th, Mabel had changed the wagon's order. Water barrels rode low and centered. Flour stayed away from the canvas edge where rain could find a seam. Knives, rope, lanterns, and tools hung outside the sleeping space. Her personal chest remained beneath the wagon fly, beside her folded blanket. She tied a plain cord between two hooks to mark where camp stores ended and her private space began. The cord would not stop a determined man. It would stop him from claiming he had crossed by mistake. The scarred red spice tin rested inside the chest, beside her personal copy of the employment agreement. She opened the tin once to make certain the lid had held through the road. Cinnamon, pepper, dried sage. Eli had bought the tin second-hand because the dent lowered the price. Mabel closed it and placed it back without allowing the memory to choose the rest of her evening. On May 1st, Crescent Fork camped beside a narrow creek lined with scrub willow. Mabel left the fire to gather dry branches from higher ground. When she returned, Kurt Vale was kneeling beneath the wagon fly. The boundary cord hung loose from one hook. Her chest stood open. Kurt held her contract in both hands. "Put that back," she said. Kurt turned without rising. He was lean and long-faced, with a sunburn across his nose and a grin that appeared before anything amused him. "Just finding out what kind of bargain you made." Mabel set the wood down. Her ribs burned, but she kept her voice level. "You already know what work I do. Didn't know Carver gave you command over half the outfit." "He did not." Kurt glanced at the page. "Says here you command the team. When I hold the lines. Private storage too. That paper belongs to me. I wasn't stealing it. Then returning it should require no argument." Men near the fire began to watch. Ben stood. Seth, coming in from the herd line, slowed beside the wagon but did not step beneath the fly. He saw the open chest, the loose cord, and the contract in Kurt's hands. Then he waited. Kurt looked toward him, expecting the trail boss to settle the matter. Seth gave him nothing. Mabel held out her hand. "The agreement." Kurt's grin faded. He placed the paper in her palm. "No harm done? You opened my chest. A piece of cord isn't a wall. No, it is a warning. You understood it well enough to unhook it." Kurt rose, dusting his knees. "You planning to complain every time a man comes near your blankets?" "I am planning to make one rule clear enough that no, complaint is needed twice." She folded the agreement and returned it to the chest herself. Only then did Seth speak. "Mrs. Hartwell's chest, bedroll, and sleeping place are private. No one enters without her permission." Kurt's jaw tightened. "You taking her side over mine? There are no sides. There is a rule you already knew. She's part of the crew. Then treat her things as you expect your saddlebag and bedroll to be treated. Kurt looked around for support and found none. Even men who doubted Mabel understood what theft or prying could mean on a trail where every possession traveled in reach of another man's hand. He hooked the cord back into place. Fine. Ask next time, Mabel said. Kurt met her eyes. I'll ask. It was not an apology. It was enough to establish consequence. Seth remained outside the boundary. Anything missing? He asked. Mabel checked the small purse, holding her $4, the folded dress, the apron, the red tin, and the contract. No. Do you want the chest moved closer to the seat? No. I want it left where I put it. All right. He turned away without offering a lock she had not requested or posting a guard she did not need. The restraint stayed with her. So did the fact that he had waited for her to speak first. The following day, the road roughened. Each rut pulled at Mabel's ribs. At midday, she ordered Ben to lift the largest pot from the rear rack. Kurt, standing nearby, gave a dry laugh. Thought the wagon was your command. It is. That is why I decide who lifts what. Ben took the pot without comment. Seth rode past as Mabel checked the water lashings. Do you need another man assigned to the wagon? He asked. I need men to answer the first request without turning it into a trial. Seth glanced once at Kurt. Then ask for what you need. I will correct refusal. You will not decide the injury means I cannot do the work. No. His answer came without hesitation. Good. He rode forward toward a cluster of cattle drifting east. Mabel watched him go only long enough to understand the distinction. He had not told her to prove herself by lifting until she failed. He had not taken the work away. He had left authority in her hands and made assistance part of it. That evening, after the crew carried coffee toward the fire, Ezra Pell approached the wagon alone. Any left? He asked. Mabel rinsed grounds from the pot. 1 cup. I always preferred what remained after men stopped reaching. She poured. Ezra leaned against the wheel. You have kin waiting in Albany? No. Anyone farther south? Why? A man likes to know who comes looking if a cook rides away with the silver. His smile invited her to laugh. Mabel set down the pot. There is no silver in this wagon worth stealing. Ezra shifted. The movement pulled his shirt open at the throat. A drilled $50 slipped into view on a green's silk cord. A small crescent had been filed into its rim. He caught the coin and pushed it back beneath the cloth. Luck piece, he said. Unusual place for a hole. Keeps a man from spending it. Then why mark the edge? Ezra's eyes narrowed before his smile returned. You notice too much. Only things that may come loose. Seth approached carrying a clean tin cup. Ben said you were short one. He held it toward her. Mabel reached at the same instant he adjusted his grip. Their fingers touched along the rim. Warm skin, brief and unexpected. Both released. The cup dropped half an inch before Mabel caught it against her palm. Seth lowered his hand. Sorry, no harm done. Ezra watched them with more interest than the contact deserved. Ben called from the remuda. Pell. Second watch. Ezra drained his coffee and left the cup on the wagon step. Wouldn't want men saying, I neglected my place. An hour later, Mabel looked toward the remuda and saw an empty space where Ezra's assigned horse should have stood. She waited beneath the wagon fly until the fire burned low. Then she saw him beyond the creek, riding alone toward a small flame hidden against the southern dark. It was not a Crescent Fork fire. Ezra returned before dawn with black creek mud on his horse's fetlocks and no explanation for where he had ridden. Mabel noticed because the same clay clung to the lower spokes of her wagon after the south crossing. She said nothing. A question asked too early could teach a liar what needed hiding. Over the next 2 days, Ezra behaved as though he had spent the night nowhere at all. He repaired a stirrup strap beside the fire, took his assigned watch, and laughed when Ben Lomax accused him of sleeping in the saddle. Yet his attention had changed. He no longer asked only who owed money or who had kin waiting at home. He asked where men rode, which pair usually held the drag, how often Ben changed the watches, whether the remuda stayed north of camp when the chuck wagon went ahead. Mabel stored each question without pretending she understood the whole design. On May 5th, Crescent Fork reached open country, broken by low mounds and prairie dog towns. Mabel slowed the mules and chose a line where the grass looked thinnest. The wagon carried less water than it had leaving Albany, but the iron pots, flour sacks, tools, and food stores still made it heavy enough to punish a bad wheel. She saw 3 holes and guided around them. The 4th lay hidden beneath a mat of dry grass. The right rear wheel dropped with a crack of timber. The wagon leaned hard. A flour sack slid against the sideboard. One mule kicked the trace, and the team surged forward against the trapped wheel. A drover ran toward the leaders with both hands raised. "Hold them!" he shouted. "Stay back!" Mabel called. He kept coming. The near mule saw him, threw its head, and crowded the animal beside it. Harness leather tightened. The wagon shifted another inch toward overturning. Mabel wrapped the lines once around her gloved hands and lowered her voice. "Stand. Easy now." Her right ribs still pulled when she twisted, but the pain no longer stole her breath. She gave the team a fraction of slack. The lead mule stopped fighting the bit long enough to hear her. "Ben," she called, "take the water barrel off the high side." Seth rode in from the flank and dismounted near the wagon. His eyes moved over the buried wheel, the slanting load, and the mules bunched against the traces. He stepped toward the seat. "Give me the lines. I have them." Seth stopped. Completely. His hand fell away before it touched the reins. "What do you need?" "Weight off the high side. Water barrel first, then 2 flour sacks. Do not cut the traces unless I tell you." Ben climbed onto the wagon bed. Kurt Vale came with him. Muttering that the axle would split before the mules stood another minute. Mabel ignored the prediction. "1 sack at a time," she said. "If the load shifts fast, the wagon rolls." Seth braced his left shoulder against the rear corner while Kurt and Ben lowered the barrel. The wagon settled instead of tipping. "Now the flour." The mules tried to step forward. Mabel checked them, then released enough pressure to keep them from pulling against a fixed weight. "Can you back them?" Seth asked. "Not until the wheel is clear. They will drag the axle deeper." She pointed toward a flat stone 20 feet away. "Put that beneath the hub when the men lift. I need a fence rail under the rim." Seth relayed the order without changing a word. 4 men raised the wagon with the rail while Ben packed earth beneath the wheel. Sweat ran along Seth's temple as he held the rear corner steady. He did not tell Mabel to hurry. He did not give the team an order over hers. "Now," she said. The men lifted once more. The wheel rose above the edge of the hole. Mabel clicked her tongue and gave the mules a measured pull. "Walk." They leaned into the harness. Packed earth crumbled under the rim. For one breath, the wheel slid backward. Then it caught the flat stone, climbed, and rolled free. The wagon came level. Kurt let out a shout before remembering he had predicted failure. Mabel moved the wagon 6 feet, halted the team, and set the brake. Her hands began to shake only after the danger had passed. Seth saw them. He said nothing before the crew. Instead, He turned to the men. No one reloads until Mrs. Hartwell says the wheel and hub are sound. Kurt wiped dust from his mouth. She's cook, wheelwright, and mule skinner now. She is responsible for this wagon, Seth said. When she holds the lines, her word stands around the team unless she gives them up. No one laughed. Public recognition carried more weight than praise would have. Mabel climbed down to inspect the axle. The uneven ground left the step higher than usual. She lowered one boot, felt the pull beneath her ribs, and stopped. Seth offered his forearm. Nothing more. Mabel looked at the dust-gray sleeve, then placed her hand upon it, his arm held steady beneath her weight. He did not close his hand over hers, or lift her as though she could not manage the descent. When both boots reached the ground, she released him. "Thank you. You had the harder part. That does not make yours smaller." Seth moved aside so she could kneel beside the wheel. The hub showed a shallow scrape, but the axle remained sound. By late afternoon, the wagon was loaded, and Crescent Fork had covered another 7 miles. Mabel's ribs ached less than they had the week before. The bruise at her knee had faded yellow at the edges. Neither injury excused carelessness, and neither controlled her work. On May 6th, Ezra found Ned Colby beside the remuda, checking a bay gelding's hoof. Ned was barely past 20 and could sit a cutting horse, as though both had been born to the same balance. He was less skilled with money. A folded account slip showed between his fingers. "Man in Dodge still waiting?" Ezra asked. Ned pushed the paper into his shirt. "He'll be waiting until I pay him. Horse note, last payment." "How much?" "Enough." Ezra crouched beside the gelding, though the hoof needed no second opinion. A young man can ride half a continent and still arrive owned by a number on paper. Ned's mouth tightened. Carver pays what he agreed. Agreements do not grow because a man needs more. Mabel tied a water barrel 20 feet away and kept her hands moving. Ezra did not press Ned again. Instead, he asked, "When Ben moves the drag pair, who takes the north edge?" Ned glanced toward the herd. "Depends on ground." "And when the wagon goes ahead, remuda usually stays north until camp is chosen." "Leaves the south side thin." Ned looked at him. "Why do you care?" Ezra smiled. "A man should know where trouble enters." That afternoon, a dust line appeared behind them. Ben rode beside the wagon and nodded toward it. "Another herd." "Whose?" Mabel asked. "Jasper Dobbins." "The fire south of camp?" Ben looked at her. "Could have been his outriders. Why is he following so close? Same road, different urgency." Ben explained that Jasper's gathering had gone badly. Sickness and poor count had left his herd nearly 200 head short. The man financing the drive had warned him another delivery without profit would end their arrangement. "Then he needs cattle," Mabel said, "or money from somebody else's trouble." Jasper arrived near sunset with 2 riders behind him. He was lean, clean-shaven, and wore a black coat better suited to town than trail, though dust had found every seam. He removed his hat when he reached the fire. "Carver." Seth met him beyond the wagon line. "Dobbins." Jasper's gaze passed Seth and settled on Mabel. "Mrs. Hartwell." Mabel had never been introduced. "You have me at a disadvantage." News travels between camps. His eyes flicked once toward Ezra, who stood near the remuda tightening a girth. Heard Crescent Fork found itself an unusual cook. "Crescent Fork found itself a cook," Mabel said. "The rest appears to trouble other people more than it troubles me." Jasper smiled. "How long do you mean to last?" "As long as the contract requires. Trail contracts are easier to sign than finish." Seth stepped into the conversation without blocking Mabel from view. "What do you need?" "Nothing tonight. I came to offer help before pride makes it costly. Jasper nodded toward the two riders. Good men, they would take work if your crew finds itself short. We are not short, not yet. The answer came too quickly. Ben heard it. So did Mabel. Seth's face remained still. Keep your riders with your own cattle. Jasper replaced his hat. A man never knows when another crew may decide wages are not worth the road. Then worry about yours. Jasper glanced at Mabel once more. A woman who notices too much can make men restless. Men who behave poorly often call observation the trouble, she said. His smile thinned. We'll see how long that courage cooks supper. He rode south with his companions. Ezra watched him leave without appearing to. Later, while Mabel banked the fire, Ben found Seth near the remuda. You trust Dobbins? No. Then why keep looking toward the wagon? Seth's gaze rested on Mabel as she secured the coffee pot against the night wind. Because she changes a place by refusing to be moved from the place she earned. Mabel heard the words. She kept her hands on the pot. Near midnight, hoofbeats passed beyond the wagon fly. Through a gap in the canvas, she saw Ezra leading Tom Baird toward the dark. Ned followed farther back. Kurt came last. At the edge of hearing, Ezra asked Tom, "When Ben moves the drag pair, which side opens first?" Tom did not answer Ezra beneath the wagon fly. Mabel heard boots shift in the dark, then the soft scrape of a spur against stone. Kurt Vale whispered something too low to catch. Ned Colby gave a nervous laugh. By the time Mabel rose enough to look through the canvas gap, the four men were already moving apart, each returning to camp by a different path. No bargain had been spoken where she could hear it. The question remained. Which side opened first, and what did Ezra intend to send through it? On May 8th, Crescent Fork entered rougher Texas country, where mesquite and thorn scrub narrowed the safe line for cattle. The herd stretched long through the brush, horns catching branches, tempers worsening beneath the heat. Mabel drove the wagon ahead, then stopped on firm ground to wait, while Seth and the point riders worked a bend in the trail. Her ribs still tightened when she reached too far across the seat, but the pain had lost its sharp edge. She could lift smaller kettles again. She no longer woke each time she rolled in her blanket. Near midday, a steer broke from the drag and drove itself into a wall of thorn. Seth rode after it before the animal could wheel back through the herd. Mabel saw the rope fall over one horn. The steer twisted. Seth's horse checked hard. The line snapped tight at an angle that pulled Seth's right arm behind him. He stayed in the saddle and turned the steer clear. But when he returned, his right hand hung lower than the left. He dismounted without touching the saddle horn. Ben noticed first. Shoulder. Pulled it. Seth gathered the reins with his left hand. Nothing more. Mabel set the wagon brake. Can you raise your arm? Seth glanced toward the cattle, still moving through the brush. Enough. That was not what I asked. Ben looked away, his mouth tightening around amusement. Seth lifted his right arm. Pain stopped it at shoulder height. He lowered it before the muscle could tremble. Mabel climbed down from the wagon, taking care not to twist her own side too quickly. May I look? Seth held her gaze, then nodded. Yes. She pointed beneath the wagon fly where shade cut the noon glare. Coat off. You take command easily. Only when a man answers a plain question with pride. Seth removed the coat, using his left hand. Mabel pressed along the top of his shoulder, through the shirt, then followed the muscle toward his back. He stayed still until her fingers reached the place where the rope had pulled hardest. His breath shortened once. That told her more than his face. No bone out of place, she said. The muscle is strained. How long? No hard roping for 2 days, perhaps longer if you make it worse. The herd will not wait for my shoulder. Ben can take the hardest pulls. Seth looked toward the segundo. He will enjoy hearing that. Then let him enjoy it while you heal. Mabel reached for a clean strip cut from an old flour sack, then paused. Ben can bind it if you would rather. Seth glanced at Ben, who was checking a cinch several yards away. You found the injury. I trust your judgment. Permission, not expectation. Mabel stepped closer. Hold your arm against your side. She wrapped the cloth around his shoulder and upper chest, passing the strip beneath his opposite arm so it would support without trapping his breath. Her knuckles brushed the warmth of his back through the shirt. Seth did not lean toward her or make the closeness carry more than it had earned. He simply stood where she placed him. Too tight? She asked. No. Breathe deep. He did. The band held. Mabel tied the knot beneath his left arm, then stepped back. 2 days without hard roping. And if I forget, I will remind you before the crew. His mouth nearly curved. You would. I would. Seth put on his coat with the right arm held close. Less than an hour later, a heifer broke toward a wash. Seth reached for his rope, stopped, and sent Ben forward instead. He obeyed in full view of the men. Mabel watched Ben turn the animal and understood the value of what Seth had done. Men often accepted a woman's judgment in private, then reclaimed authority once others could see. Seth had made no such correction. Late that afternoon, Mabel drove the wagon ahead to a shallow creek and began choosing campground. While searching for dry wood beyond a screen of willow, she heard Ezra's voice. You said wages would not clear it. Lou Haskins stood with his back to the creek. Ezra faced him, one shoulder turned toward camp. Mabel stopped before the branches moved enough to reveal her. They won't, Lou said. Then take a better beginning. Ezra drew the green silk cord from beneath his shirt. 5 drilled $half slid together in the lowering sun. Mabel saw the crescent marks flash along their rims. Ezra worked 1 coin toward the small clasp. For what? Lou asked. For knowing when a man's service has stopped being worth his loyalty. Carver hasn't cheated me. Not yet. Ezra loosened the clasp with his thumbnail and slid $1 half free. 4 remained on the cord. He placed the loose coin in Lou's palm. Lou did not close his fingers at once. What do I owe for this? That means something tomorrow. Ezra smiled without warmth. Every debt does. Lou looked toward camp. And if I decide I don't want the rest, then return what you took. That simple? No debt is simple once a man starts counting what it might buy. Lou's slipped the loose coin into his vest. Ezra tucked the 4-coin cord beneath his shirt. Keep it hidden. Dobbins will tell us when the road is ready. Mabel backed away before either man turned. She walked downstream, filled her bucket where the bank curved, and returned by another route. She now knew the coins were payment. She did not know the full service being purchased. Desertion was possible. A missed watch was possible. A loosened remuda line, a false report, a gate left open at the wrong hour. Too many crimes fit the shape. At the wagon, Seth tightened a cinch using his left hand. You were gone longer than water required, he said. Mabel set down the bucket. You notice roots. I notice when the easier one is not used. I saw Ezra with Lou. Seth's attention sharpened, and Ezra gave him one of the marked coins. 4 remain on the cord. What did Lou agree to? Nothing I heard clearly enough to name. Ezra spoke of loyalty and a road being ready. He named Dobbins. Seth turned toward the willows. I can question both men now. And they will say Ezra repaid a private debt. You believe Lou is bought. I believe he accepted silver. Those are not always the same thing. Seth looked at her. You want to wait. I want to know what the coin purchases before we accuse a man of selling it. The urge to act showed in the set of his jaw. His voice remained level. Tell me if Lou changes watch, horse, or position. I will, and if Ezra approaches your wagon after dark, I wake the camp. Seth nodded once. Fair. The next evening, Jasper Dobbins appeared again without his herd. He claimed he was checking the crossing north and comparing water reports, but he rode the edge of Crescent Fork camp longer than the errand required. He studied the changed watches, the remuda placement, and Seth's guarded right shoulder. Thorn Country collecting its price? Jasper asked. Nothing we cannot pay, Seth said. Jasper's gaze shifted toward Mabel, who was hanging a kettle over the fire. A woman who sees too much can become expensive. Mabel did not turn. A man who circles another camp without business already is. Jasper smiled. Still quick, still working. Seth stepped between Jasper's horse and the wagon line. You have your water report. I do. Jasper touched his hat and rode toward the cottonwoods south of camp. He did not continue to his own herd. Instead, he circled through low ground and stopped where the trees screened him from Crescent Fork while leaving the camp's rear edge within hearing. After supper, Ben found Seth behind the cook canvas. Mabel had gone to the creek for more water. What do you mean to do after Dodge? Ben asked. Take another contract if Calvin offers one. That isn't what I meant. Seth adjusted the support beneath his coat. Then ask plainly. Ben glanced toward the creek path. Do you want a future with her? Seth took time before answering. If she reaches Dodge, takes every dollar owed, and still wants my company when she has a road away from me, I mean to ask whether she could ever consider one. One what? A future that might lead to marriage. Ben exhaled. Waiting may cost you. Then it costs me. You could lose the chance before you speak. Better that than ask while I hold her wages, her return passage, and command of the road. Beyond the cottonwoods, Jasper remained motionless. Mabel returned carrying water and heard only Ben's last warning. Waiting may cost you. Seth answered, that is still better than making her answer before she is free to leave. Mabel stepped around the wagon before either man saw her listening. She did not know what answer they meant. Jasper did. He rode south with one loose-drilled coin hidden in Lou Haskins's vest, still hanging beneath Ezra Pell's shirt, and a private hope he could turn against them. By the time Jasper's dust vanished south, Mabel understood that Crescent Fork's danger no longer rested in one coin or one whispered question. Ezra had begun counting positions. Jasper had begun collecting weaknesses. Seth's private hope gave him another blade to use, though Mabel still did not know what answer Ben had warned him might cost. The question followed the herd north for 5 days. On May 3rd Crescent, Fork reached a supply crossing used by freight wagons, local traders, and trail outfits moving toward the Red River. The stop should have meant flour, salt, coffee, axle grease, and one night without measuring every cup of water. Instead, Jasper Dobbins arrived before Mabel finished inspecting the new sacks. 2 unfamiliar riders came behind him. Neither wore an outfit's mark. Both carried bedrolls too clean for men already deep into a cattle trail. Jasper dismounted near Seth as though delivering help already requested. My own herd is short on cattle, not hands, he said. I can spare 2 riders if Crescent Fork begins losing men. Seth stood with his right arm close to his side beneath the coat. The shoulder had improved, but he still left the hardest roping to Ben. We have lost no one. Not yet. Jasper nodded toward the strangers. Good men. They'll work for fair wages. Whose wages? Yours once you need them. And what do you receive? Jasper smiled. A contractor who keeps another man's cattle from scattering deserves more than thanks. Then, keep your riders with the herd already paying you. One of the strangers looked toward Crescent Fork's remuda, not at the horses as animals, at their number. Mabel saw his eyes move along the line and stop where 6 saddle horses stood nearest the south edge. Jasper lowered his voice, though not enough to keep it from reaching the wagon. You changed watches 3 times in a week. Men notice when a boss stops trusting them. Men working for me can ask why, and men deciding they no longer work for you. Seth's face remained still. Take them south. Jasper settled his hat. Pride is expensive when bad ground and weather meet. So is arriving with replacements before the trouble begins. Jasper's gaze shifted to Mabel. Your cook listens well. She works well, Seth said. You are delaying her. Jasper mounted but did not leave the crossing. He took the 2 riders to his own fire beyond the low ground, where his smaller herd would arrive by evening. The distance allowed Ezra to move between camps without needing darkness. Mabel watched from the wagon while checking flour seams. Ezra spoke first with Tom Baird beside the water barrels. Tom rubbed a thumb over a split glove and glanced toward the south fire. Carver keeps moving men before pay catches up, he said. Ezra answered with his back toward Mabel. Money comes faster when a man stands where someone needs him. Tom looked toward the herd. Where's that? The drag when Ben shifts the pair off the south side. No coin changed hands. The question mattered more. Later, Ezra found Ned Colby near the trader's hitch rail. Ned held the folded account slip from Dodge. Man won't wait past June, he said. Then don't arrive owing him, Ezra replied. Carver pays what he agreed. Agreements do not grow because a debt does. Ezra nodded toward the remuda. Which 6 horses pull easiest from the south line? Ned frowned. Why 6? 3 men cannot ride 2 horses each, not for long. Long enough to clear a camp before pursuit starts. Ned pushed the account slip into his shirt. He did not answer, but he looked toward the nearest horses. Kurt Vale came last. He had spent the afternoon correcting a younger hand's knot and complaining that Ben gave orders as if no other man knew cattle. Ezra let him finish. Some outfits know the difference between a hand and a segundo, he said. Kurt glanced toward Jasper's fire. Dobbin's offering rank. A man earns rank by proving he knows where an outfit is weak. And where is this one weak? Ezra's eyes moved toward the rear line, where the wrong men leave at the same time. Beyond them, Lou Haskins watered his horse alone. One hand pressed once against the inside of his vest, where the loose drilled $50 remained hidden. Ezra called his name. Lou pretended not to hear. Mabel stored each detail separately. Tom wanted money. Ned feared his Dodge debt. Kurt wanted authority. Lou had taken silver but now avoided the man who gave it. 4 weaknesses. Only 3 appeared ready to move. At supper, one of Jasper's riders came for coffee, without asking. His outfit's cook followed, a thick-set man named Wallace Pike, who had spent the afternoon telling anyone within reach that no woman belonged between a chuck wagon and a herd. He accepted Mabel's cup, tasted it, and looked toward Seth. Carver keeps a camp pet better than Dobbins keeps a remuda. Mabel lifted the coffee pot from the fire. Your boss brought replacement riders before Crescent Fork lost a man. Wallace's grin paused. What's that got to do with coffee? Nothing, which makes it curious you came here to discuss my place, instead of asking why he expects ours to empty. Tom lowered his eyes to his plate. Ned stopped chewing. Kurt's jaw tightened. Wallace set the cup on the wagon step. A woman who studies men too much becomes unwelcome. Then men should give me less worth studying. Jasper called from the far fire before Wallace answered. The cook returned south without finishing his coffee. After dark, Mabel found Seth beside the wagon, tightening a saddle strap with his left hand. "Your shoulder?" she asked. "Better. Better is not healed. I have not used it hard. I saw." Seth let the strap fall. "You came to say more than that." Mabel stood on the open side of the wagon where no canvas trapped their voices. "Jasper expects us to lose men before we do. Ezra is no longer only asking what they owe. He is asking where they ride." Seth's attention sharpened. Names: Tom, Ned, Kurt. Lew took 1 coin. Today he avoided Ezra. What did the others say? Tom learned which side opens when Ben moves the drag pair. Ned was asked which 6 horses could be pulled from the south line. Kurt was told rank belongs to a man who sees where an outfit is weak. Seth looked toward the sleeping camp. "I put Ezra off the drive tonight for asking about horses, for riding to Dobbins and buying men. You can prove neither. You saw the coin. I saw 1 coin given to Lew. Lew has not agreed to anything we can name. If you confront Ezra now, Jasper learns we are watching. He changes the men, the hour, or the method." Seth's fingers closed around the leather strap. Anger showed there, instead of in his voice. "You want me to wait while he measures the crew?" "I want you to change what he is measuring." "How?" "Move the watch pairings again, but give terrain as the reason. Put Tom on a line Ben can see. Keep Ned away from the 6 south horses. Do not let Kurt share the same rear watch with either of them. Only Ben knows why." Seth studied the crossing, Jasper's distant fire, and the men lying between. "And Ezra? Let him believe his map is still useful. That leaves you near a man who knows you. Notice him. I am not offering myself as bait. Good. I am asking you not to ruin the only advantage we have." Seth breathed out once. "Ben knows. No one else. And you do not confront Ezra." "Not yet." Mabel rested one hand on the wagon rail. Seth placed his beside it, close enough that the backs of their smallest fingers touched. Neither moved. The contact had no practical purpose. That made it different from the cup, the forearm, or the bandage around his shoulder. Mabel felt the rough warmth of his skin along one narrow line. She could have withdrawn. Seth could have closed his hand over hers. He did not. She left the touch where it was for 1 breath. Then another half, choosing the stillness without promising what came after it. When she drew back, Seth released the rail. "I will speak to Ben," he said. "Not Ezra, not Ezra." Near midnight, Mabel woke to low voices beyond the wagon fly. Through the canvas gap, she saw Ezra at the edge of the dying fire, with Tom Kurt and Ned before him. Lew was nowhere among them. Ezra touched Tom's shoulder. Money, Kurt's. Rank, Ned's. A clean account in Dodge. Then he looked toward the 6 horses standing nearest the southern dark. 3 men open the rear, he said. 6 horses carry them out. 6 horses carry them out. Ezra's words followed Mabel north for nearly a week. Tom, Kurt, and Ned did not desert. They rode their watches, ate from the same pot, and answered orders with only small delays. That made them harder to confront. A man who had already left could be named. A man waiting for the right hour could still claim innocence. Seth changed the watch pairings as Mabel advised. Tom never held the south drag without Ben nearby. Ned was moved away from the 6 easiest horses. Kurt found himself paired with men who had no reason to admire him. Ezra noticed every change. He did not complain. Lew Haskins kept apart from the others, one hand sometimes pressing the vest, where his loose drilled $50 remained hidden. By May 24th, Crescent Fork had reached the Red River approach, where dry channels cut through open grass and low rises offered the only shelter from wind. Mabel's ribs no longer hurt when she lifted a kettle. A hard twist still pulled beneath the right side, but the injury had become a warning instead of a command. Seth's shoulder had improved too. He used both hands for ordinary work and left the hardest roping to Ben without making a performance of obedience. Neither spoke of their fingers resting together on the wagon rail. The contact remained between them, too deliberate to dismiss and too slight to name. Near midday, the mules raised their heads before the sky changed. The lead pair stopped chewing their bits. Horses in the remuda turned west together, tails lifting. Mabel stood on the wagon seat and saw a brown wall erasing the horizon. "Wind," Ben called from the herd. Seth rode in from the point, his dust-gray hat already snapping against its stampede string. "Dust squall," he said. "How long?" Mabel asked. He judged the western line. "Minutes." The herd had not settled for the noon rest. Nearly 1,900 cattle still spread across uneven ground, and the remuda stood too close to the northern edge. If the saddle horses broke south when the wind struck, they would drive panic into the herd before the riders could separate them. Seth pointed toward a low rise east of camp. "Ben, move the remuda behind that ground. Take 4 men. Kurt, close the nearest cattle. Ned, hold the north side. Tom, ride the drag." For one breath, everyone moved together. Then the first gust reached them. The cook canvas cracked above the wagon. One stake tore free and skipped through the grass. The western side of the fly lifted high enough to expose Mabel's private chest and bedding. She caught the hanging rope before it struck the mules. "Roll the canvas," a hand shouted. Mabel looked from the broad sheet snapping overhead to the open line between the wagon and the low rise. Ben's men were pushing the remuda east, but frightened horses had begun crowding against one another. The easiest opening still led toward the cattle. "Do not roll it," she called. Seth turned his horse. "What do you see?" "A gap the horses will choose unless it looks closed." Another gust filled the canvas like a sail. 2 men seized the lower rope and nearly lost their feet. Mabel pointed toward the rear axle. "Tie one corner there. Take the far edge toward the rise. Keep it low until Ben turns the leaders." Kurt stared at the whipping cloth. "That won't hold horses. It does not have to. It only has to change what they see." Seth looked once toward the remuda, then back at Mabel. "Do it." Ben tied the near corner to the axle. Kurt and another hand caught the far rope and ran crouched toward the rise. The canvas snapped between them, rising and falling in the dirty air. Mabel climbed onto the seat and gathered the lines. "I need the wagon east 20 feet, she called. "No farther. The ground drops beyond that." Seth dismounted beside the lead mules. "Want me at their heads? No ride outside the right wheel. Turn anything trying to cut behind me." He mounted again. "Understood." The squall struck full force. Dust swallowed the sun and drove against Mabel's face in dry needles. The mules lunged. She gave them one step of line, then checked the rush before it became a bolt. "Walk, not run." The wagon rolled east over rough ground. The right wheel struck a stone. Mabel corrected before the team could shy. Through the brown haze, Seth crossed behind the wagon and turned 2 saddle horses trying to cut through. He used his horse's shoulder and position, not a rope. Ben pushed the remuda leaders toward the rise. Kurt hauled the far canvas edge higher. The cloth stretched between wagon and hill, loose enough to move, broad enough to make the opening appear closed. The first horses reached it at an angle. They checked, crowded, then turned along its length. Seth moved with them. Ben pressed the lead animals behind the rise. The rest of the remuda began to follow. The plan worked. Then the far rope slid through Kurt's hands. The canvas dropped. 3 horses broke toward the opening. "Wrap it around the saddle horn," Mabel shouted. Kurt caught the rope, looped it around an empty saddle tied to the wagon, and hauled. The canvas rose before the horses reached the gap. Seth turned the lead gelding. The other 2 followed. Behind the rise, the remuda began to settle. A metal hook tore loose from the upper canvas and whipped toward the wagon. Mabel ducked. The hook struck the sideboard with a sharp ring. Both led mules jumped left. The right wheel dropped into a shallow rut, throwing Mabel against the seat rail. She held the lines long enough for Ben to reach the team. Then the wagon lurched again. Her boot slipped. Mabel caught the side rail with one hand and fell from the seat into the dust. The loose canvas swept around her shoulder and filled with wind. It dragged her backward before she could free herself. Seth came through the haze on foot. He caught her beneath the arms and turned his back toward the whipping hook. Canvas struck his coat and folded around them both. The world narrowed to cloth, wind, and the strength of his body holding hers upright. "Are you hurt?" he asked near her ear. "No." Her voice shook once. "The team? Ben has them." Mabel's hands rested against Seth's chest. His arms held her firmly enough to steady her and no tighter. Dust thinned around their faces. His hat was gone. Dark hair lay across his forehead and grit marked one cheek. She felt his breath against her temple and the fast beat beneath his coat. The danger had passed enough for either of them to move. Neither did. Mabel knew she was choosing those extra seconds. Seth's gaze lowered to her mouth, then returned to her eyes. He did not close the distance. He waited. A kiss would have been easy there, born from fear and relief. Too easy, Mabel would not let the storm make a promise for her. She stepped back. Seth released her at once. No tightening of his hands, no hurt pride. He caught the fallen canvas and asked, "What do you need?" Mabel drew one steadying breath. 2 men on the torn edge. Move the wagon behind the rise. Then check the herd's north line. Seth turned toward the crew. "You heard her." By late afternoon, the squall had passed east, leaving pale sky and fine brown dust over every blanket, saddle, and cooking pot. No horse had broken a leg, no cattle had scattered. Kurt carried rope burns across one palm, and one drover had bruised a shoulder when his mount crowded the rise. Small injuries beside what might have happened. Mabel spread the torn canvas beside the wagon and stitched the longest split with heavy thread. The repaired seam lay dark and uneven across the cloth. Seth sat several yards away, mending a snapped buckle. He did not mention the almost kiss. Neither did she. The restraint between them was no longer empty. Near dusk, Ezra stood beside the remuda while Tom, Kurt, and Ned checked tack. He touched each man once at the shoulder. Tom, Kurt, Ned. Lou remained by the fire, apart from them. Ezra counted under his breath and looked south. Mabel watched him fix their positions in memory. He was not merely choosing men willing to leave. He was choosing the exact places their absence would expose. Beyond the low ground, Jasper Dobbins rode beside one of Crescent Fork's younger hands long enough to be heard. "Your boss is watching a woman," he said, "while his crew comes apart." The younger hand carried Jasper's insult back to camp before sunrise, and by breakfast it had split into 3 versions. Seth Carver watched the cook instead of the herd. Seth had let a woman order the drive. Seth would lose cattle because he was too busy waiting for Mabel Hartwell to smile. No man repeated the words where Seth could answer them. They appeared in unfinished jokes, slower responses, and glances toward the wagon whenever Mabel spoke. Jasper had found a way to make restraint resemble weakness. On May 25th, as Crescent Fork camped near the Red River crossing, Ben rode in from the South Road with news of a freight outfit expected the following day. "Bound back toward Texas," he said while taking coffee. "Driver lost one passenger to fever 2 camps north. Says he has an open seat if anyone needs it." Mabel kept pouring. The information meant little until a person needed a road south. By the next morning, one did. Tom Baird failed to appear for the final hour of night watch. Ben found him asleep beneath a cottonwood 1/2 mile north of camp, his saddle blanket folded under his head and Black Creek mud on his boots. Tom claimed he had followed a stray horse. Every horse was present. Seth stood beside the remuda while Ben checked the halters. "You were assigned to the south line," Seth said. Tom rubbed his face. "Thought I heard a gelding break north. You left without waking the man beside you. Didn't want to rouse the camp over one horse. There was no horse. Kurt Vale came away from the fire. He came back. After his watch ended," Ben said. Kurt's mouth tightened. "Maybe men are tired of being shifted like pieces on a checkerboard." "The shifts keep the herd covered," Seth answered. "They also tell every man here you don't trust him." Ned Colby remained near the wagon with his account slip hidden inside his shirt. Ezra Pell sat beside him, repairing a stirrup leather that needed no repair. Lou Haskins held his cup in both hands and watched the ground. Mabel served breakfast without entering the argument. Seth's shoulder was nearly sound, but she saw the old strain in the way he held his right arm when anger tightened him. The crew expected punishment. Seth gave Tom a harder duty instead. "You ride beside Ben today." "Kurt takes Tom's next watch." Kurt stepped forward. "You think I'm part of whatever this is?" "I think a missed watch must be covered." "That isn't an answer. It is the order." Hooves sounded from the south before Kurt could refuse. Jasper Dobbins rode into camp with 4 men behind him. His smaller herd remained beyond the low ground, close enough for its dust to stain the morning sky. Jasper removed his hat as if arriving for a neighborly call. "Trouble with your crew, Carver?" "No. I heard one of your men vanished last night." Tom turned away. Seth's voice stayed level. "You hear too much about camps that are not yours. Men talk when they are unhappy." Jasper's gaze moved over Tom, Kurt, and Ned before settling on Mabel. "They talk more when a trail boss forgets what he brought them north to do." Seth stepped forward. "Say what you came to say." Jasper dismounted. He wanted both boots on the ground and both crews watching. "I came to renew my offer. 2 riders today. More when you need them." "We do not. Perhaps not for the cattle." Jasper glanced toward the repaired canvas, then back to Seth. "But a man planning to marry his cook may need help remembering where his command ends." Harness rings clicked near the remuda. A mule stamped beside the wagon. Coffee hissed where it spilled against an iron lid. Every human voice stopped. Mabel stared at Jasper. Her first thought was simple, a lie. Then Ben lowered his eyes. Seth did not deny it. The omission struck harder than Jasper's words. "You did not know?" Jasper asked. Mabel set the ladle beside the pot. Her hand remained steady. "Whatever you overheard from another man does not become yours, because you repeat it before a crowd." "I heard enough," Jasper said. "Carver means to ask whether you might marry him after Dodge." Seth moved between Jasper and the wagon without blocking Mabel's view. "You are done?" Jasper smiled. "Then call me a liar." Seth did not. Mabel spoke before the crew could turn her into an object of pity. "Seth." It was the first time she had used his given name before the men. Is it true?" He removed his hat. "I meant to ask whether you could ever consider a future with me after Dodge." Ben knew. "Yes. When? Days ago. Before the dust squall, yes." The memory of Seth's arms around her beneath the canvas returned with humiliating force. She had believed that space belonged to them alone, unfinished and unnamed. Ben had already known what Seth hoped might follow it. Jasper had known too. "Why did Ben know before I did?" she asked. "He asked what I wanted after the drive, and you answered with my life, with my hope." A hope spoken to another man can make refusal costly before the woman has even heard the question. Seth accepted the words without defense. Jasper watched the rupture widen. Mabel continued. "Did you hire me because you wanted a wife?" "No." "Did you give me Wagon authority to keep me near you?" "No." "Did my work become part of some bargain I never agreed to?" "No." His answer came at once. "The work is yours. The wages are yours. Nothing beyond the contract belongs to me. Yet you let another man speak of my future before I was part of it." Seth's jaw tightened. Yes. The admission stopped her anger from becoming easy. He had done wrong. He knew the shape of it. That did not make the wound smaller. Jasper gave a soft laugh. "A fine speech after the crew has seen where your attention lies." Mabel turned on him. "Your crew has seen you enter another man's camp to shame a widow because you cannot make profit from your own cattle." The laugh vanished. "Take care. You have warned me before. It has not improved." Jasper put on his hat. "A crew follows the man watching the herd, not one waiting for a woman to choose him." "Then return to yours," Mabel said, "and see whether it still follows you." One of Jasper's riders glanced south before Jasper did. The blow landed where she intended. Jasper mounted. As he passed Ezra, their eyes met, briefly, enough to confirm the public humiliation had served a larger plan. When Jasper rode away, camp did not return to ordinary work. Tom avoided Seth. Kurt carried his plate beyond the fire. Ned whispered something to Ezra. Ben approached Mabel, but she lifted one hand. "Not now. I'm sorry. You should be." She did not soften it for him. Seth remained 10 feet from the wagon. He did not come nearer. Near noon, the herd began moving. Seth rode beside the wagon only long enough to say her name. "Mabel." She kept both hands on the lines. "Not now." "All right." He dropped back toward the cattle. His obedience hurt because she trusted it. By evening, Crescent Fork had crossed into Indian territory and camped beside a shallow run of water. Mabel found Seth beyond the firelight checking a cinch that needed no repair. He rose when she approached, but left several feet between them. "I did not hire you because I wanted a wife," he said. "I believe you." Relief touched his face, but she stopped it. "That does not settle the rest." "No, Ellie used to tell neighbors what we were going to do before he asked me. Take in a boarder. Sell my sewing table, move rooms." By the time I heard, saying no meant making him look foolish before other men. Seth held his hat at his side. He said nothing against the dead man. "He was not cruel," Mabel continued. That made it harder to explain why his kindness sometimes left no room for mine. Seth's gaze stayed on her. "I made your future into a conversation you were not part of. Yes, I am sorry. Good intentions do not erase it, no." He did not reach for her. Mabel was grateful. She also felt the absence of his hands with an ache that made anger harder to carry. "If I leave this drive," she asked, "do I keep every dollar already earned?" "Yes." "Even before Dodge?" "Yes." "Will Calvin be told I deserted?" "No." "Do I still receive return passage?" "Yes, even if you want me to stay." Seth swallowed once. "Even then?" Mabel studied him. "I am not saying I will leave. I understand. Do not decide what that means." "I won't." From the southern road came the groan of an axle. The expected freight wagon rolled toward camp, its canvas hood pale in the last light. The driver called to Ben that one seat remained open for Texas. Mabel turned toward the road. A way south had arrived, before either she or Seth knew whether she would take it. The freight wagon's pale canvas hood stood at the edge of Crescent Fork camp, while every man pretended not to watch Mabel decide whether she would climb beneath it. The driver watered his team, checked a rear wheel, and told Ben he would leave at first light. One passenger had taken sick 2 camps north. The open seat would carry another traveler toward Texas and within a day's ride of Albany. A road south, real enough to put dust on her skirt. Seth did not approach the wagon that night. He assigned watches, checked the remuda, and slept near Ben with the other men. Mabel lay beneath the repaired fly with her personal chest beside her, and listened to the freight horses shift in their harness. She had asked whether she could leave. Seth had answered yes. The question now belonged entirely to her. Before dawn on May 29th, he came to the wagon and stopped outside the cord, marking her private space. In one hand he carried a leather wage pouch. In the other, he held Crescent Fork's employer duplicate of her agreement. Her own signed copy remained beneath the scarred red spice tin inside her chest. Seth placed the duplicate and the pouch on the wagon bench, then stepped back. "I counted your wages through yesterday," he said. $30 a month, figured by days worked. Mabel kept both hands around her coffee cup. Payment was due in Dodge. The balance is due in Dodge. Work already done is already owed. Did Calvin authorize you to settle it? He authorized me to pay any hand leaving for cause before the sale. And my cause belongs to you. She set down the cup. If I take the freight wagon, what does Crescent Fork call it? A voluntary departure with wages paid through May 28th. Not desertion. No. Not breach of contract. No. My return passage, still owed. Crescent Fork will pay the driver the ordinary fare. Will you tell Calvin I failed the drive? No. Will you tell him I left because I would not answer you? Seth's fingers tightened once along the edge of his coat. No, and if I stay, you finish the same work you signed for. Nothing beyond it. No promise after Dodge. None you do not make. Mabel looked at the ranch copy on the bench. Why bring that? So you can see the wage count against the terms. Calvin plans to meet the herd in Dodge for the sale and payroll. The ranch copy returns to his papers there. My copy stays with me. Yes. Did you promise the driver anything to persuade me? Only the fare if you choose his seat. Did you offer a bonus if I remain? No. Seth answered each question without warmth meant to sway her. That restraint did not repair what he had done. It gave her another fact to place beside the wrong. Do you want me to leave? She asked. No. Do you want me to stay? Yes. Then which are you advising? He took time before replying. Neither. That is not helpful. It is not meant to help me. The words landed where argument would have failed. A man could leave a door open while standing in it. Seth had moved out of the way. He nodded toward the pouch. The freighter leaves at first light. Ben will load your things only if you ask. I will be with the herd. You will not wait here for my answer. No. He returned the employer duplicate to his leather document case and rode toward the point before sunrise. Mabel waited until he was beyond the cattle before opening the wage pouch. Folded bills and coins slid into her palm. She counted them against the days worked. No shortage, no unexplained generosity. At the bottom lay an ordinary $50, worn smooth at the edge. No drilled hole, no crescent mark, no green silk. Mabel carried the money beneath the wagon fly and opened her chest. Her personal agreement rested where Kurt Vale had returned it, beneath the red spice tin. She lifted the tin and eased back the dented lid. Cinnamon, pepper, and dried sage still scented the metal. She placed the plain $50 inside. It struck the bottom with one clear note. Earned money. Not a purchase. Not gratitude dressed as silver. She closed the lid and packed. Her dress, apron, contract, tin, bedding, and few personal things fit inside one chest and a rolled blanket. She did not pack because she had decided to leave. She packed because a choice was not honest unless she could carry it. That evening, the freight driver greased his wheel hubs while Jasper's distant fires burned beyond the low ground. Tom Baird ate apart from the crew. Kurt Vale sharpened a knife that did not need sharpening. Ned Colby unfolded the account slip from Dodge and read the number by firelight. Lou Haskins sat near Ben, one hand occasionally touching the vest, where the loose marked coin remained hidden. Ezra moved among them, without appearing to stop. Seth stayed at the herd line. He did not send Ben to ask what Mabel meant to do. He did not look toward the wagon every time a board creaked. The absence of pressure made the decision harder, because she could no longer blame resistance for whichever road she chose. Before sunrise on May 30th, the freight driver called across camp. "Mrs. Hartwell, I need your answer." Mabel carried her bedding roll from beneath the fly. Men glanced up and then found reasons to study boots, saddles, or coffee. Ben waited beside the freight wagon with his hands empty. The driver climbed down. "I can lash that behind the seat." "No," Mabel said. "No trouble, Mom. We'll have it tied in a minute. I mean no passage." The driver looked toward her packed chest. "You're staying north." "I am finishing the work I agreed to do." She turned to Ben. "Please put the bedding back beneath the fly. I will carry the chest." Ben obeyed without smiling, as though he understood her decision had not given anyone victory. The freight wagon rolled south after sunrise. Its canvas hood shrank along the road until dust took it. Mabel watched until the last wheel disappeared. Relief did not come, neither did regret, only ownership. Jasper had not driven her away. Seth had not held her there. She had chosen the work still unfinished and the truth still hidden. She found Seth near the remuda after the herd began moving deeper into Indian territory. He dismounted when she approached, but left several feet between them. "The wagon left," he said. "I saw. You stayed." "I did." Hope reached his face and stopped before it became assumption. Mabel respected the effort enough to speak plainly. "I am staying to finish my contract. Jasper means to cripple this crew, and I have helped uncover how. I will not give him the road because he embarrassed me." "Understood. This is not an answer about marriage. I know." "Do you?" Seth met the question without flinching. "You chose the drive. That is all I have the right to know." The answer loosened a knot she had carried since Jasper spoke before the camp. Mabel stepped closer and reached for Seth's hand. Surprise crossed his face, but he left his fingers open. She closed her hand around his once, a brief, deliberate squeeze. Hers to begin, hers to end. Then she let go. "We should move the herd," she said. "We should." He mounted and rode toward the point without turning the touch into a promise. Over the next 3 days, Crescent Fork pushed north beneath a dry southern wind. Mabel's belongings returned to their proper places. Her personal agreement remained beneath the red tin. The ordinary $50 stayed inside. Seth's employer duplicate remained in his leather case. Near dusk on June 2nd, Mabel stopped the wagon beside a shallow creek and went beyond the cottonwoods for wood. Voices carried from the far bank. Tom spoke first. Carver changed the watches again. "We won't get another clean night," Ezra answered from behind the trees. "You don't need one." "What happens if he catches us?" "Dobbins covers you. Work money. A place after the break." Tom's voice dropped. "What break?" Ezra gave a low laugh. "The one they cannot hold after half their rear line walks." "And the horses?" "6 from the south edge, 2 for each man. Fast enough to clear camp before Carver knows which way to chase. The one they cannot hold after half their rear line walks." Tom's question ended beneath the cottonwoods, but Ezra's answer followed Mabel back to camp. She waited until Tom had gone by another path before moving. Seth stood beyond the fire, checking the herd through the dark. "They plan to leave during trouble," she said. 3 men, 6 horses. Dobbins promises work and money after the break. Seth's hand settled on his saddle horn. "I put Ezra off the drive before sunrise. Then Tom, Kurt, and Ned deny everything. He is planning to cripple the crew. Yes, removing him now may only make Jasper signal them himself." Seth faced her. "You want to let him continue? I want to hear what he promises next. That puts you close to him." "I have been close to him for a month." "Not after he knows the plan is near." Mabel held his gaze. "You asked for my judgment before. I am giving it now. Ben watches the remuda. I watch from the wagon line. We do not stand together. If Ezra meets one of them, one of us may hear what the other cannot." Seth looked toward the cottonwoods where Tom's had stood. Every instinct in him urged action. And if Ezra rides, no pursuit. Mabel, chasing one man, leaves the herd thinner and warns the rest. His jaw tightened. All right, no pursuit unless someone is in immediate danger. Over the next 2 days, Ezra behaved like a man certain patience would win. He took his assigned watches, repaired tack, and spoke to Tom only where others could see. Kurt stopped complaining aloud. Ned kept the account slip inside his shirt. Lou Haskins avoided all 3. On the evening of June 5th, Crescent Fork camped beside a shallow creek in western Indian Territory. Jasper's herd remained several miles south, hidden by low ground, but one of his riders appeared near sunset with word that bad footing blocked the next crossing. Seth thanked him and sent no answer. The rider returned south. Ezra disappeared before the coffee cooled. Ben moved toward the remuda with a halter over one shoulder. Mabel lifted a flour sack onto the wagon bench, then remained behind the lowered side canvas as though arranging stores. Through a narrow opening, she saw Ezra cross the creek and kneel beside a stand of willow. Lou approached from the north. "I told you I'm done," Lou said. "You told me you were frightened," Ezra replied. "That is not the same. Carver knows. Carver knows men are restless. He doesn't know names." Ezra drew the green silk cord from beneath his shirt. 4 drilled $half slid together upon it. The empty place where the 5th had been removed showed near the clasp. He worked 1 coin toward the end. "Take another. Then the first becomes yours, whether you ride or not." Lou stared at the silver. "What are the 3 shares?" Ezra's fingers stopped. "Who told you that?" "You did when you thought I wasn't listening. Dobbins gets 3 shares of what he saves." "Saves from what?" "From Carver losing control." "You mean from us helping him lose it?" Ezra held out the coin. "You want to reach Dodge with debt hanging from your neck." "I want wages I can spend without wondering whose cattle bought them." Lou closed Ezra's hand around the $half. "No." From the remuda came the creak of leather beneath Ben's shifting weight. Ezra turned toward the sound. Lou stepped back. "You never saw me here." "You already took 1 payment," Ezra said. Lou touched his vest. "I'll return it before witnesses." Dobbins does not release a debt. Fear moved across Lou's face. but he did not reach for the second coin. Then I'd rather owe him silver than owe myself the herd. He left through the willows. Ezra remained crouched with the refused coin in his fist and all 4 coins still on the cord. Hoofbeats sounded from the south. Jasper rode in alone and dismounted beyond the creek. A folded paper, tied once with narrow cord, showed inside his coat. Mabel could not read it, but the paper had been prepared before any emergency existed. Jasper saw the coin in Ezra's hand. Which one? Haskins. Then Haskins leaves first. He refused. No, he became a warning. Jasper pushed the paper deeper into his coat. Move the night. We cannot wait for the Cimarron. Carver changed the watches again. Then use the men before he changes them out from under you. Ben began circling back toward camp. Mabel stepped away from the canvas opening and lifted the flour sack as Ezra returned. He did not look toward her. Jasper rode south without approaching the fire. Seth listened first to Ben and then to Mabel, keeping their accounts separate until both had finished. Lou refused the second coin, Ben said. He named Dobbins and 3 shares. And Jasper carries a prepared paper, Mabel added. I could not read it. Seth stood beside the wagon wheel with anger held in the line of his mouth. Ezra moves the departure sooner now. Yes, Mabel said. Then I take him tonight. No, we have a witness. We have a frightened man who may run if you force him to speak before he is ready. Jasper still has Tom, Kurt, and Ned. Ben rubbed dust from his jaw. Lew will talk to me. He already chose at the creek. Seth looked from Ben to Mabel. And if Ezra disappears before dawn, then we learn where he goes. You still want no pursuit. I want the herd protected more than I want Ezra caught early. A long breath left Seth. Ben speaks to Lew. No threats, no promises beyond what Crescent Fork already owes him. Ezra stays where he is. Lew came to the wagon fire near midnight with Ben. He did not surrender the loose coin. He showed it in his open palm, then closed his fingers again. The crescent-shaped file mark caught the light before it vanished. Ezra gave me this near the Texas crossing, he said. Promised Dobbins would pay more after we left Carver short. Said 3 of us walking before bad ground would make the herd spread. Dobbins would ride in with men and take 3 shares for saving it. Will you say that in Dodge? Mabel asked. Lew swallowed. If we reach Dodge, Seth said, keep the coin. Lew frowned. You trust me with it. I trust the choice you made tonight. Tomorrow has to earn its own. Lew tucked the coin back inside his vest. I'll hold it. After Ben led him away, Seth remained beside the wagon, close enough for conversation and no closer. Mabel set the coffee pot aside. You wanted to remove Ezra. I still do. You did not. You were right about the herd. That is not the only reason. No. Wind moved over the grass, warm and dry. Mabel rested one hand on the wagon rail. I stayed because I chose the work, and because I wanted the truth finished. I know. I also believe you meant no harm when you spoke to Ben. Seth did not reach for forgiveness, meaning no harm did not keep me from causing it. No, I will not ask you to forget that. Good. Mabel stepped closer. But I do not want the harm to decide every choice that comes after it. Seth's breathing slowed. He made no move toward her. What do you want to decide? She placed one hand against the front of his coat. His body went still beneath her palm. Mabel rose onto her toes and kissed him. Briefly, deliberately, Seth kept his hands at his sides. When she lowered her heels, he did not follow. He waited. The space he gave her answered more than words could have. Mabel caught his coat again and returned to him. This time Seth lifted one hand to her upper arm, light enough that she could leave. The second kiss lasted longer, warm and restrained, carrying no claim beyond itself. Mabel ended it. His hand fell away. "That was my decision," she said. "I know. Do not make a camp promise out of it." "I won't." Beyond the creek, a pale spark rose into the dark. One flash, then another. Far to the south, a shuttered light answered once. A horse called from the same direction. Ezra stood at the edge of camp with the lantern in his hand. Jasper had moved the night. The answering light vanished before Seth could reach Ezra, and by the time Crescent Fork camp broke into motion, 4 bedrolls lay empty. Tom Baird was gone. Kurt Vale was gone. Ned Colby was gone. Ezra Pell had taken the lantern, 6 saddle horses, and the cleanest route south. No torn green silk lay near his blankets. No dropped coin marked the ground. Only hoofprints crossed the shallow creek and disappeared into grass, darkened by night moisture. "Lou?" Ben called. No answer came from the remuda. Seth mounted before the rest of the crew had saddled. "Ben, take 2 men east. I'll follow the horse sign south." Mabel came from beneath the wagon fly, fastening her coat. No pursuit. Seth turned in the saddle. 4 men stole 6 horses, and Lou is missing, which is why I'm riding. If Jasper wants you away from the herd, he has given you every reason to leave. Seth looked toward the south, where the lantern had answered. The herd still lay spread over a mile of dark ground, restless beneath a low western cloud bank. I can take them before daylight, or lose 4 more riders while Jasper waits for the rear to thin. Ben rode back from the creek at a gallop, found something. He pointed west of the remuda, toward a strip of tall grass beside a shallow cut. A boot heel had torn the mud. One patch of grass lay flattened in the shape of a body. 20 yards farther, Lou Haskins pushed himself upright beneath a cottonwood. Blood darkened the hair near one ear, but he was conscious. His eyes found Ben first, then Mabel. "Coin," he said. "Still have mine." He pressed one hand to his vest. Seth dismounted beside him. "Who hit you?" "Ezra." Lou swallowed and winced. "He came for the silver. Said I'd ride or give it back." "Where are the others?" Ben asked. "Gone south." Tom whistled when the horses were ready. Lou lifted a shaking hand toward the grass. Ezra had the cord out. I grabbed it. "The green cord?" Mabel asked. "4 coins on it." He closed his fist as if reliving the pull. "He struck me. I tore the cord loose before I fell, threw it into the grass so he couldn't take it." Then Tom signaled. "Ezra kicked me once and ran." "Did he see where you threw it?" Seth asked. "No. Wind took the cloth. Grass was high." Mabel crouched without touching Lou's head. "Are you seeing double?" "No. Sick to your stomach?" "A little." "You do not ride today." Lou gave a rough laugh. "Wasn't planning to." Seth looked at Ben. "You and 2 men search. No one touches anything alone." "Who witnesses?" Mabel asked. Seth scanned the camp. Will Mercer, Daniel Fitch. Both men had slept on the north side and were not tied to Ezra's group. Ben brought them to the flattened grass. Lou remained seated, where he could point but not stand. "I threw it toward that thorn," he said. The search took long enough to make certainty begin slipping away. Ben moved through the grass one section at a time, hands above the ground. Will watched his left side. Daniel watched the right. Dawn began lifting behind the clouds. Then Ben stopped. A strip of green silk showed beneath bent stems, tied around 4 drilled $half. The cord had broken at one end. Dirt clung to the crescent file marks. Ben did not pick it up immediately. "Will, I see 4 coins." "Daniel?" 4, on broken green cord. Only then did Ben lift the bundle by the silk and carry it to Mabel. Lou drew the loose 5th coin from his vest and placed it on his open palm. "This is the one Ezra gave me near the Texas crossing." The drilled hole and crescent mark matched the others. Mabel looked at Seth. "I want the orders spoken before anyone moves them again." He nodded. Do it. Ben recovered 4 coins on broken green cord from the place Lou identified. Will Mercer and Daniel Fitch witnessed the recovery. Lou Haskins is transferring 1 loose-marked coin to me now. She held out a folded clean cloth. Lou set the coin onto one corner. Ben placed the 4-coin cord on another. Mabel folded the cloth so the loose coin remained separate from the cord, then tied the bundle with plain thread. 5 coins total, Daniel said. 4 together, 1 loose. Will confirmed. Mabel carried the bundle beneath the wagon fly and unlocked her personal chest. The scarred red spice tin remained closed beside her contract. She did not place evidence inside it. She set the cloth bundle beneath the folded dress, locked the chest, and returned the key to the cord at her waist. When she came out, Seth was standing over hoofprints, leading south. The western clouds had risen into a black shelf. Heat pressed low against the grass. Cattle near the rear stood and began shifting without reason. Jasper's herd dust showed faintly beyond the southern rise. Seth pointed after the stolen horses. We know where they went. We know where Jasper wants you to go, Mabel said. Those horses belong to Crescent Fork. So do the cattle. I can take Ben and 2 men. Be back before the storm. If Ezra expects pursuit, he will lead you farther than you think. Jasper does not need to steal the herd. He only needs to make it impossible to deliver whole. Seth's anger remained controlled, which made it heavier. Lou had been struck. 6 horses were gone. 4 men had betrayed the outfit under his command. Every part of him wanted a trail he could follow and a man he could put in reach. Mabel pointed toward the rear cattle. Count what Jasper already removed. Tom, Kurt, Ned, Ezra. If you take 4 more, we lose 8 hands before bad weather. That is the opening he bought. Ben came beside them. She's right. Seth looked south once more. Then he turned his horse away from the tracks. No pursuit. The decision cost him enough that no one mistook it for caution. Ben, change the line. Will and Daniel stay near the wagon. Put 2 riders on the north edge. Pull the herd compact before the wind arrives. Mabel studied the ground. A shallow wash curved east of camp. Its south shoulder was firm enough for the wagon, while the lower bank would slow cattle without trapping them. The remuda could be held behind a low rise to the north. The repaired canvas still lay rolled beneath the wagon seat, its heavy stitched seam dark across the cloth. Bring the herd toward the wash, she said. Seth followed her gaze. Too narrow. Not if you turn the leaders before they enter it. Put the wagon on the south shoulder. Stretch the repaired canvas from the rear axle toward the rise. It will not stop cattle. It may close the picture long enough to turn them. Yes, Ben nodded. Will and Daniel can hold the lower bank. Seth looked over the route. I take the point. Ben controls the canvas crew. 2 riders guard the remuda. No one fires unless a life is in danger. He gave the assignments himself, turning Mabel's plan into command without stealing its source. Men moved. The wagon rolled toward the wash. Mabel drove, measuring every rut. Ben lashed the repaired canvas where she directed. Will and Daniel checked the lower bank for loose stone. Lou lay beneath the wagon fly, with a folded blanket under his head, still awake but too dizzy to stand. Mabel positioned the chest where it could not slide. The evidence remained locked inside. By full morning on June 13th, the herd had been drawn tighter. Thunder sounded west, too far away to bring rain yet. Jasper appeared on the southern rise, with riders behind him, and a folded paper tied with narrow cord inside his coat. He came before any call for help. Seth rode toward him but stopped beyond pistol range. You lost men, Jasper called, and horses. neither concern you. A herd this size cannot hold together, short-handed in a storm. Then take yours farther south. Jasper touched the paper beneath his coat. I can spare riders at the proper price. Mabel stood on the wagon step with one hand on the lines. Jasper's eyes moved from the repaired canvas to the compact cattle and then to Seth. His confidence narrowed. They had not chased. They had not opened the rear. His plan had reached the herd and found the gap closed. From behind the southern cattle came a gunshot, then a second. Birds lifted from the wash. The rear longhorns surged forward, horns striking horns, and the sound rolled through the herd like timber, splitting in a fire. Seth wheeled toward the point. Ben grabbed the canvas line. Mabel snapped the reins. The cattle began to run. Mabel drove the wagon toward the wash as the rear cattle surged. The first wave did not run in a straight line. Longhorns crowded left, struck the animals ahead, and spread panic through the herd by weight alone. Dust rose beneath their hooves before the storm wind reached camp. Ben caught the repaired canvas line and shouted for Will Mercer and Daniel Fitch to take the lower bank. Seth rode for the point. Jasper remained on the southern rise with his paper inside his coat and riders behind him, waiting for Crescent Fork to fail. Mabel pulled the wagon onto the firm shoulder above the wash, set the brake, and turned toward her chest. Ben. He reached the wagon while the canvas snapped at his back. Mabel unlocked the chest and lifted the clean cloth bundle from beneath her folded dress. The scarred red spice tin stayed where it belonged beside her personal contract. Will. Daniel, she called. Both men came close enough to hear while still holding their positions. Mabel placed the bundle in Ben's hands. 4 coins remain on the broken green cord. 1 loose coin is wrapped apart from them. You recovered the 4 before these men. Lou transferred the 5th before them. Ben felt the separate folds without opening the cloth. I have both parts. Keep it inside your coat until the herd settles, Will nodded. I witnessed the 4, Daniel added, and the loose 5th. Mabel locked the chest again and climbed to the seat. Now move. The wagon rolled forward. Ben and 2 hands pulled the repaired canvas from the rear axle toward the low rise. Its heavy stitched seam strained but held. The cloth did not stop the cattle. It changed the shape of the open ground. The led animals saw wagon, moving canvas, and riders where empty space had been. They checked. That hesitation gave Seth time. He crossed in front of the first leaders, turning his horse broadside without firing or throwing a rope. 2-point riders followed. The front cattle bent east. Behind them, the next ranks began to curve. Higher, Mabel called. Ben hauled the canvas line over his shoulder. Will and Daniel rode the lower edge of the wash, keeping cattle from spilling downhill. A steer struck the outer cloth with 1 horn. The repaired seam tore 3 inches and stopped. The animal recoiled, turned, and carried those behind it into the curve. Thunder rolled west. Wind drove dust across the wash. Mabel kept the mules walking, never fast enough to bolt, never slow enough to leave the opening uncovered. Jasper rode down from the rise. Carver, he shouted, you're losing them. Seth did not answer. He stayed with the leaders until the herd's movement changed from a charge into a broad circle. Jasper drew the folded agreement from his coat. I can put 12 men on that line. 3 shares, and I save the delivery. Mabel's saw the paper in his hand before she saw any of his riders move. You brought terms before help was requested, she called. Jasper turned toward her. You think paper proves anything? It proves you expected a price before there was a rescue. Seth reached the wagon line as the herd's front completed the turn. Take your men south. Jasper held up the agreement. You're short 4 hands and 6 horses. Sign or watch the rear break again. There is nothing left to save, one of Jasper's riders said. He was an older man with a grey beard and mud to his knees. His eyes followed the cattle now curving behind the rise. The herds turned. Jasper swung toward him. You'll ride where I tell you. Not into another outfit's cattle after the dangers passed. A second rider pulled his horse back. They had not discovered sudden loyalty to Crescent Fork. They had seen the rescue price collapse. No emergency meant no honest claim. Near the canvas line, Ben braced both feet and hauled as the wind struck. His coat opened. The clean cloth bundle slipped partly from the inside pocket. One green silk end showed at the fold. Ezra Pell came out of the dust from behind Jasper's riders. He saw the silk. Recognition hardened his face. Give me that. Ben turned. Ezra hit him across the mouth and grabbed for the cloth. Ben staggered, but kept one hand inside his coat. Will reached Ezra first. Daniel caught his other arm. The 3 men went down beside the wagon wheel without a shot fired. Ben rolled clear with blood on his lip and the bundle still against his ribs. He knows what it is, Mabel said. Ezra stopped fighting too late. Lou Haskins pushed himself upright beneath the wagon fly. His face was pale, and one hand held the sideboard for balance, because he paid with them. Jasper's expression did not change, but Tom Baird's did. Tom had ridden in behind Ezra and the stolen horses, expecting the herd already broken. Kurt and Ned waited farther south. Jasper looked at them as if they were strangers. These men left Carver's outfit. That does not make them mine. Tom stared at him. You promised work. I promise nothing to thieves. You told Ezra. Tom stopped, but the words had already crossed the ground. Lou pointed at him. Money for you. A clean account for Ned. Rank for Kurt. 3 men opened the rear. Jasper turned on Lou. A frightened hand with stolen silver. Silver Ezra gave me. Then you took payment and refused the second. Tom's fear became anger. He said we'd ride for you after the break. Jasper did not answer him. Ned lowered his eyes. Kurt kept his mouth closed. Seth rode between Jasper and the wagon. Leave. Jasper folded the agreement once. You think you have proof because a weak man kept a coin? No, Mabel said. We have separate witnesses, a prepared agreement, men placed by motive, stolen horses, an assault, and your arrival before anyone asked for help. The coins only join the accounts. Jasper looked toward the herd. Crescent Fork cattle were settling into a tighter circle beyond the wash. His failure stood in plain view. He mounted and led what remained of his riders south. Tom did not follow. Ned and Kurt hesitated, then stayed where Ben could watch them. Will and Daniel bound Ezra's hands with saddle rope. Ben took the cloth bundle from his coat and returned it to Mabel before both witnesses. 4 on the cord, 1 loose, same folds. Mabel accepted it. Will confirmed. Daniel confirmed. She locked the bundle back inside her chest. 5 days later, on June 18th, Crescent Fork entered the Dodge City stockyards with the herd intact enough to sell. Calvin Rudd had arrived as planned for settlement and payroll. He listened before speaking. So did the cattle buyer, Jasper's financial backer, and a deputy United States Marshal called after Ben sent word from the edge of town. The statements were taken separately. Lou described the first coin, the refused second, and the promise of 3 shares. Ben described the creek conversation and the temporary custody of the bundle. Will and Daniel described the recovery site, the count, and every transfer they witnessed. Tom admitted Jasper had promised money and work after Crescent Fork lost control. Ned denied everything until the Dodge account holder produced his note and described a stranger asking what sum would clear it. Then Ned admitted Ezra had promised payment. Kurt held longest. When Jasper refused to name him as a hired hand or future segundo, Kurt finally acknowledged the offer of rank. Mabel spoke last. She placed the clean cloth bundle on the stockyard office table and opened only the outer fold. 4 coins remained threaded on the broken green silk cord. The 5th lay separate. "These marks do not prove the whole plan," she said. "They support the accounts of men who received or saw them. The order matters." She gave the chronology without embellishment. The buyer opened Jasper's agreement. It granted him 3 shares of Crescent Fork's proceeds in exchange for rescuing cattle described as distressed before any request for help had been made. "I will not honor this at settlement," the buyer said. Jasper's backer read the same language and ended their private contract before leaving the room. Calvin stated that Crescent Fork would pursue a civil claim for the 6 stolen horses, delay, and losses. The marshal received the 4-coin cord, the loose 5th coin, Jasper's agreement, and the sworn statements. He sealed the 2 coin components separately and wrote a receipt naming Mabel Hartwell as the person who surrendered them. Ezra remained in federal custody for transfer through the proper process tied to the acts committed in Indian Territory. No verdict came that day. Accountability began there instead. Calvin paid Mabel the rest of her prorated wages and added $20 for team handling under threat. She counted both amounts before signing her name. Outside the office, the work of remembering every transfer, every mark, and every spoken promise finally left her body. Her hands trembled once. Seth stood nearby and did not touch her. "What do you want now?" he asked. "Today?" "Today. Before anyone asks for tomorrow." Mabel stepped into him and wrapped both arms around his waist. Seth waited until she held him fully. Then he embraced her. When she lifted her face, the kiss carried more hunger than the first, and no claim beyond what she gave. She ended it with her hands still against his coat. "Today," she said, "I wanted that." By morning, the questions waiting for Mabel no longer belonged to Jasper Dobbins, Ezra Pell, or any man who had tried to put a price on her choices. They belonged to her. On June 19th, she woke beneath a boarding house roof in Dodge City, with clean sheets under her, freight whistles beyond the window, and the marshal's receipt folded inside her personal contract. Her remaining wages and $20 team handling bonus lay in a cloth purse on the washstand. The scarred red spice tin sat beside it. Inside rested the ordinary $half she had earned before choosing to remain with the drive. The 5 marked coins were no longer hers to guard. A deputy United States Marshal held them under seal with Jasper's agreement and the sworn statements. Mabel read the receipt twice before placing it beneath the contract again. Proof did not always look grand. Sometimes it was 1 page bearing her name and another man's duty to account for what she had surrendered. After breakfast, the owner of a nearby eating house asked to speak with her. Mrs. Delaney was a broad woman with sleeves rolled above strong wrists and flour caught in the seam of one cuff. She led Mabel through a kitchen twice the size of the Crescent Fork wagon bed. 3 stoves stood along the brick wall. A chopping table held onions, beef bones, and a ledger open beside a jar of pencils. "I heard you fed a trail crew from Texas," Mrs. Delaney said, "and drove the wagon. I did both. I need a woman who can keep stores, cook breakfast and supper, and stop my hired boys from taking half the sugar home in their pockets." "What are the hours, Mrs.?" Delaney gave her a measuring look. Perhaps expecting gratitude before questions, Mabel waited. Before 5 until the supper dishes are done. Midday is lighter unless a train brings extra men. How many days each week? 6, Sunday breakfast only. $12 a month, you said. Meals and a room above the kitchen. Does the room have a lock? It does. Who holds the other key? No one but me, and I use it only if fire starts or a tenant fails to answer for 2 days. When are wages paid? Last day of each month. Who purchases the stores? I do. Then shortages caused by your buying do not come from my wages. Mrs. Delaney's mouth bent, not quite a smile. No. And boarders eating after hours? They pay the house. You cook only during agreed service. Mabel walked to the storeroom. Flour sacks were raised from the floor. Salt stood in 2 covered bins. The coffee was locked. Mrs. Delaney knew more than she first admitted. When would you need an answer? Mabel asked. Tomorrow by noon. Then you will have one. Outside, Seth waited across the street beside the empty chuck wagon, not at the eating house door. He had not entered while she spoke, though he could have claimed concern or curiosity. The herd would be loaded onto railroad cars the next day. Until then, Crescent Fork's crew had little work beyond settling accounts, replacing the stolen horses when Calvin could arrange it, and preparing for the southbound return. Seth held 2 cups of coffee. He offered one when Mabel crossed the street. How was it? A real offer. Good. You sound as though you mean that. I do. They walked toward the quieter edge of the stockyards where the empty wagon stood beneath a cottonwood, cattle bawled from the pens. Iron wheels struck rail joints farther east. The noise made privacy difficult, but it also kept their words from becoming a performance for anyone passing. Mabel set her cup on the wagon step. Calvin spoke to you? He offered me winter work as foreman at Crescent Fork, and after winter, possibly another drive. Nothing signed. What do you own? Seth did not pretend surprise. 2 horses, my saddle, my gear, a little over $300 saved. Land, no. House, no. Debt, none. Could you rent one? A small place near Albany. 2 rooms if the roof is sound. Perhaps 3 if the owner has become realistic about the rent. And if we married, would you expect my wages in your account? No. Would you sign a note in my name? Not without your hand beside mine. Would Crescent Fork riders eat from my stove because you are foreman? Only if Calvin pays for provisions and your labor under a separate agreement. If I took another trail contract in spring, Seth rested his forearms on the wagon rail. We would discuss dates before either of us promised work that affected the other. That is not what happened when you spoke to Ben. No, he accepted the reminder without lowering his head into shame. I will not ask another man what our future should be before asking you what you want. Mabel studied the repaired canvas rolled beneath the seat. Its heavy seam remained visible where dust had settled into the stitches. You have answers ready. I spent the road to Dodge, learning which questions I should have asked before I imagined answers. That sounds practiced. It is. Practice does not make it false. No. Seth drew one slow breath. I do not want to make promises so fine they cannot survive an ordinary Tuesday. I can promise no debt in your name without your signature. Your wages remain yours unless you choose otherwise. If hired hands eat from your work, they pay through the ranch or through me. If a drive is offered, we discuss it before I answer Calvin. Beyond that, I will likely leave muddy boots where you object and fail to notice when a hinge begins squeaking. I will likely work through a meal because a supply count refuses to balance. Then we may both require correction. That is more believable, a train whistle cut through the air. Mabel waited until the sound passed. Mrs. Delaney offered $12 a month, meals, and a locked room. She needs an answer tomorrow. Seth's jaw tightened before he mastered it. Would you like the work? I might. Then take it. Even if it keeps me in Dodge, even then, you would return to Texas without me. If that is what you choose, would you write? If you wanted letters, would you come back? If you asked me to, or if I had honest business that did not pretend to be an excuse. His restraint no longer felt like distance. It had become evidence. Still, Mabel did not want their future decided beside a stockyard after danger had made every feeling sharp. I do not want to answer marriage now, she said. I am not asking. You wanted to. Yes, do you still? Yes. The plainness of it warmed her more than persuasion would have. Mabel picked up her coffee, though it had gone cool. Then I have terms. Seth's eyes held hers. Tell me. I will return south with the empty wagon. I will rent my own room near Albany. I will take paid work under my own name. We will court where people can see us, but people seeing us will not decide what follows. Agreed. July, August, and most of September. Seth's brow moved slightly. Most. You may ask me on September 20th. Ask what? Do not make me regret giving you the date. A smile reached him and stopped short of triumph. Marriage. Yes, and before then, no engagement. No announcement. No one is told what I will answer because I do not know yet. Agreed. You may write. You may visit. You may disagree with me. Generous. Do not test the limit. He inclined his head. I won't. Mabel set down the cup again. The answer she did have pressed against her ribs, no longer painful, but no longer willing to remain hidden. There is one thing I know today. Seth waited. I love you. He did not reach for her at once. The words struck him visibly, but he left the next distance hers. I love you too, he said. No condition. No question attached. Mabel raised one hand to his face, feeling the roughness along his jaw, and kissed him. Seth's hand settled at her waist only after she moved closer. The kiss was warm, steady, and chosen without urgency. When Mabel ended it, he did not follow. September 20th, he said. Not one day earlier. Not one day. And if your answer is no, then you will have waited for the truth. Seth covered her hand once where it rested against his cheek, then released it. On June 20th, Crescent Fork cattle moved into the railroad loading pens. Iron gates clanged. Men shouted over steam, hooves, and the rattle of cars. Calvin settled the final freight papers. The employer duplicate of Mabel's contract returned to the ranch records. Her personal copy remained inside her chest beneath the red tin. Mrs. Delaney received Mabel's answer before noon. Not yet, Mabel told her. But I would like the offer remembered if I return to Dodge. A good worker who asks where the keys are kept is worth remembering, Mrs. Delaney said. Late that afternoon, after the final cattle car pulled east, the empty chuck wagon turned south. Mabel sat on the driver's seat with the mule lines in her hands. Her chest was secured beneath the repaired fly. Ben and the returning hands rode behind. Seth kept pace beside the lead team without touching the reins. Dodge City receded beneath smoke and summer dust. Mabel faced the open road. Take me home, she said. Then ask me again on September 20th. The empty chuck wagon left Dodge late on 20th, hours after the last Crescent Fork cattle were loaded onto the railroad cars. Mabel held the lines for the first mile. Seth rode beside the lead mules, but did not ask to take them. The wagon moved faster, without nearly 1,900 cattle setting its pace. Yet, no one hurried the return into a promise larger than it was. Mabel slept beneath the repaired wagon fly in the private space still marked as hers. Seth laid his bedroll near Ben Lomax and the returning hands. At dawn, they drank coffee before the others rose. Sometimes they spoke of wages, winter work, and the cost of renting 2 rooms near Albany. Other mornings they watched the road brighten without needing to fill it. At night, Seth kissed her forehead before returning to his own blankets. Once, north of the Red River, beneath a clear sky, Mabel caught the front of his coat and kissed him with enough warmth to make his breath stop. "That is not permission to move your bedroll," she said. Seth smiled. "I know." The answer pleased her more than persuasion would have. Rain held them beside a swollen creek for half a day in Indian territory. Mabel checked the wagon hubs while Seth walked the bank for a safer crossing. When he returned, he asked what she thought before moving the team. No storm required the courtesy. No rival watched. The habit remained. They reached the Crescent Fork country on July 13th. Calvin Rudd met the wagon near the ranch corrals with news from Dodge. The Deputy United States Marshal still held the sealed 4-coin cord, the loose 5th coin, Jasper's agreement, and the sworn statements. The complaints tied to the assault, stolen horses, and interference in Indian territory had entered the federal process. No verdict had appeared. Calvin's civil claim for the horses' delay and losses had begun its own slower course. Mabel kept the marshal's receipt with her professional papers. She did not measure her future by how much Jasper Dobbins suffered. The part of justice that belonged to her was already visible. Wages paid, work credited, testimony accepted, and her name written where the truth had passed from her hands into official custody. Calvin offered her a seasonal contract, preparing trail provisions, inspecting wagon stores, and training cooks before northbound departures. The paper named her Mabel Hartwell and set wages, authority, supplies, and payment dates in plain terms. She read every line before signing. Seth accepted the winter foreman position. Mabel rented a room above a seamstress's shop in Albany. Seth rented a small 2-room house on the edge of town, but did not suggest that 2 rents were wasteful. Through July and August, they courted in ordinary weather. He visited when ranch work allowed. He wrote when it did not. His letters mentioned lame horses, fence wire, and one hinge that would not remain straight. Hers contained supply prices, flour spoilage, and the names of 2 women seeking paid kitchen work. The lack of grand declarations became its own reassurance. One Sunday in August, Seth mentioned that Ben believed Calvin might offer him another spring drive. "Have you spoken to Calvin?" Mabel asked. "Not yet. Were you going to?" "Tomorrow." She set down her cup. "Before we discussed the dates." Seth stopped. The old error stood between them in a smaller shape. "What?" "Then do not. No anger was needed. We speak first. After that, you may answer him." Seth nodded. "We speak first." He did not defend the habit or ask credit for correcting it. The following evening, they compared her spring training schedule against the likely departure. Only then did Seth speak to Calvin. On September 20th, he met Mabel beneath the cottonwoods near Crescent Fork, where the grass had begun turning gold. He carried no deed, no house key, and no promise of land, only his hat in one hand. "We have had the summer," he said. "You have seen me when no one was watching." "I have. You have seen me repeat part of the same mistake, and stop when I named it." Seth took one step closer and left the remaining distance to her. "Mabel Hartwell, is the life we have tested still one you want to build with me?" She remembered the open freight seat, the wage pouch on the wagon bench, the locked room in Dodge, and the contract, carrying her own name. Seth's love stood beside those choices. It did not replace them. Mabel held out her hand. "Yes, He did not take it until she offered. Yes to marriage, yes to marriage, yes to work, yes to 2 rooms until we can afford 3, yes to arguing before you speak to Ben. Relief crossed his face. September 28th. September 28th. They married 8 days later beneath the same cottonwoods. Calvin, Ben, Lou Haskins, and a small group Mabel had chosen stood with them. Before the ceremony, Mabel placed 2 plain rings inside the scarred red spice tin. She handed the box to Seth. He opened it only after she gave it to him. When the vows ended, he took out the smaller ring and waited for her hand. The kiss afterward was warm and certain. It was not the end of the story they were building. That evening, Mabel returned the ordinary earned $50 to the tin. Marriage did not make their days effortless. Seth left muddy boots where she objected. Mabel worked past hunger when a supply list refused to balance. They disagreed about money, horses, and whether the leaning shed would survive winter. He asked before assuming her labor. She asked for help before resentment turned it into a test. Affection became ordinary without becoming small. Coffee shared at dawn, his open hand on the table, her head against his shoulder while they read Calvin's letters, a kiss at the doorway before either went to work. In April of 1885, Crescent Fork prepared another drive north. Mabel helped hire Clara Wynne, a widow who had spent 2 years feeding quarry crews and arrived with written conditions already prepared. Clara wanted $30 a month, meals, return passage, private storage beneath the wagon fly, authority over the team while driving, and clear payment dates. Mabel read the paper once. "Move the first payment date forward," she said. A woman should not travel half the road before seeing whether an employer keeps his word. Clara changed it. Calvin signed. On departure morning, Mabel brought her a new green spice tin with a narrow painted border around the lid. Clara turned it in her hands. "For me, for whatever you decide belongs in it. You are not giving me yours." Mabel touched the scarred red box inside her satchel. "No, I can pass an opportunity forward without handing away my own history." She set the red tin on the wagon shelf beside the green one. At the first major crossing, she would take it south again. For the first week, the 2 boxes would travel together. Seth waited beside 2 saddled horses while the last flour sacks went aboard. "Do you want me to ride back with you at the crossing?" he asked. "Ask me there. I may prefer the freight wagon." "I will ask." He bent and kissed her forehead. Mabel caught his vest and kissed him again, warmer and longer, before mounting her mare. The chuck wagon moved north beneath the pale spring sky. Seth rode beside her without touching her reins. Beyond the ranch gate, he reached one hand into the space between their horses and left it open. Mabel extended hers first. Only then did he take it.